In 1960, the American Heart Association finally stepped forward to say what the morgues already knew. Heavy cigarette smoking was linked to heart disease. But even then, they didn't say it straight. They coughed it through a handkerchief, called it a statistical association, not a cause. That wasn't scientific restraint. That was lawyer speak in a lab coat. It was the institutional version of looking you in the eye and saying, "We're not saying you're drowning. We're saying we noticed a correlation between water and dying." It protected them from lawsuits. It handed Big Tobacco a lifeline, and it gave the public just enough ambiguity to keep lighting up without guilt. This wasn't a warning. It was a whisper, padded in soft language, polished to reflect everything except blame. By 1960, cigarettes weren't just popular. They were sacred. They were ritual, identity, escape. Every corner of American life had them baked in the hands of movie stars, on the desks of doctors, in the mouths of fathers tucking kids in with a cough. They were sold as courage, sex, calm, and capitalism, all rolled into one. The entire media ecosystem was hooked on tobacco money. CBS, Life, Reader's Digest, every outlet was slathered in ad revenue. The tobacco companies weren't just merchants, they were engineers. They designed filters to look safe and deliver poison faster. They tuned nicotine like a radio frequency. This wasn't ignorance. This was precision harm, sold as freedom. And everyone, from the hospitals to the White House, played along. The American Heart Association didn't speak up because it suddenly grew a conscience. It spoke up because staying silent had become riskier than saying something. For decades, doctors smoked in hospitals. Medical journals cashed tobacco checks. Researchers who warned early were iced out. The profession wasn't asleep, it was complicit. And when they finally moved, they did so with the grace of a man apologizing only after the house is already ash. They called it caution, but it was just cowardice, delayed long enough to be safe. It wasn't the CEOs dropping dead, it was the workers, the men who drove trucks, fixed engines, stood at lathes, the men who were told to smoke to calm their nerves, to be men, to show grit. They lit up through the day and died before retirement. Cigarettes weren't just a health risk. They were a class weapon, marketed as relief, designed as slow execution. You worked yourself numb, smoked to keep moving, and by 55 your heart gave out. Not from plaque, but from a system that wrung every beat out of you and left you with an ashtray and a pension form you'd never use. Meanwhile, the media, supposed to warn, the watchdog, played dumb. They didn't miss the story. They were paid not to see it. To say smoking kills in 1960 was to accuse the very machine that broadcast the news. So instead, we got soft focus coverage, flanked by Marlboro ads and puff pieces. Even after the American Heart Association blinked, networks gave equal airtime to tobacco-funded hacks blaming heart disease on type A personalities, as if lung rot needed a debate partner, as if dying was just a matter of bad vibes. And the deeper insult? The American Heart Association knew even more than it said. It had data on emphysema, vascular collapse, respiratory ruin, but it narrowed its language to heart disease, not because it was the only danger, but because it was the most palatable one to say out loud, the one they could say without tearing the whole house down. To admit the rest would have been admitting that this wasn't just a public health issue, it was a civilizational flaw. The same post-war science that gave us polio vaccines and moon rockets was also used to make a leaf into a weapon, a miracle of engineering, calibrated to destroy you one puff at a time. So what did that 1960 statement really say? Not that they were ready to fight, but that they were ready to start covering their ass. It was a memo, not a reckoning, a controlled leak. It let just enough truth slip through to keep the American Heart Association relevant, but not enough to threaten their seat at the table. The timeline says it all. The bodies started piling up in the 1910s. The science firmed up by the 1950s. The American Heart Association blinked in 1960. The Surgeon General caught up 4 years later, and the tobacco companies kept lying, kept buying silence, until lawsuits in the 1990s finally blew the doors off. By then, millions were already buried. The 1960 announcement didn't save lives. It saved reputations. It was the moment the house fire got a fire marshal's report instead of a hose. Not a shout of truth, but the sound of institutions managing their exposure while the nation choked. a footnote delivered too late to the people who needed a lifeline decades earlier.